Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this presentation on the results of global consumer market research conducted this year by GlobeScan on behalf of Global Seafood Alliance. Before we get into the presentation, I just want to introduce myself and our main speaker, Gail, who will be taking us through the research. My name is Elise Avalon. I'm the marketing director at the Global Seafood Alliance, and I'm joined today by Gail Chong, who is a principal at GlobeScan. If you attended GSA's Responsible Seafood Summit earlier this year in Colombia, you received a taste of some of these insights already, but today Gail is going to do a bit of a deeper dive into the results of the survey. The goal of this survey was to understand purchasing decisions related to seafood and certification labels like best aquaculture practices, as well as how to inform engage with consumers about responsible sourcing. As a marketer, I'm personally really excited for this presentation today, and I think no matter what part of the seafood industry you're in, whether you're a producer, a retailer, food service operator, NGO, etc., you'll find value in these insights today. Before I hand it over to Gail, I just want to review some housekeeping items. All participants are automatically muted and all registrants will receive a recording of this webinar via email, hopefully by the end of the day today. If you have questions as Gail goes through the presentation, please just type them into the chat box and we'll do our best to answer them at the end during the Q&A session. And I think that's it. Thank you again for joining us today, and I'm going to hand it over to Gail to take us through the study.
Great. Sorry, I just want to make sure everyone's seeing the slides. We're good, right, Elise? Yeah.
Yep, you're all set.
All right. Well, good morning and good afternoon, everyone, wherever you are. Thanks so much for joining us on this webinar today. And thanks, Global Seafood Alliance, for having me. I'm really happy to be able to share these results with you. I'll just start with a little bit of background about the research, as well as a little bit about GlobeScan, so you know who we are. So as Elise said, I'm Gail. I'm based in Toronto, Canada with GlobeScan. We're a pretty small but mighty little insights and advisory firm that specializes in the space of trust, sustainability, and engagement with consumers, as well as expert stakeholders, and different key opinion leaders around the world. So our aim really is to equip our clients with data-driven insights to help them navigate different shifting societal as well as stakeholder expectations. So we're a small organization and we are B Corp certified, but we have been around for over 35 years. And we have some pretty long-standing global research programs, which I'll actually share a little bit more with you about later on in the webinar. So as Elise said, today I'll really be sharing the key findings from the research that we conducted over the summer. So what we'll be covering is just some aspects of consumer behaviors and attitudes relating to seafood, what matters to consumers when they are choosing seafood. I'll also share some insights and attitudes around their perceptions of farmed versus wild-caught seafood, how certifications can help to build trust with consumers, and how we can also better engage with consumers, and where there could be potential opportunities for us to shape a stronger narrative around responsible seafood. So in terms of the methodology of the research study, Global Seafood Alliance and GlobeScan worked together to create an online 10-minute quantitative survey. The research was conducted in 5 markets in the US, Canada, UK, France, and Spain, and was offered in English, Spanish, and French, where the languages are spoken. The survey was with 1,000 consumers per each of those markets based on nationally representative samples, gender, age, region, and we had about 5,000 people participate in the survey in total. All of the research participants had to be seafood consumers, meaning they've eaten seafood in the last year, or they had to have purchased seafood in the last 6 months. So that could capture people who may be shopping for their household, but maybe not necessarily eating it themselves, although that's a very small minority of the sample. All of the charts and data you'll be seeing today are based on the combined data. So that means the data is weighted equally across all 5 of these markets. So let's just start by understanding how consumers actually feel about seafood and what they're buying so that we can understand a little bit more about who they are. So first, seafood consumers love seafood. 87% of them say they really enjoy eating it. 63% of them are eating it at home at least once a week. And 62% of them believe that it's one of the healthiest sources of protein. So this enjoyment of seafood actually indicates a very strong emotional and health-based connection, which is really a powerful foundation for engagement with consumers. When we look at the numbers in a little bit more detail on enjoyment of seafood, as I said, nearly 9 in 10 seafood consumers really enjoy eating it, so they love it or they like it. And when we break this down across the markets, we see it's pretty consistent. When we look at it by generation, again, it's fairly consistent, though maybe Gen Z is a little less enthusiastic than older generations, but overall, seafood is in a very strong position in terms of consumer desires and preferences. When we look at, where people say they're eating seafood, when we ask them, like I said earlier, a lot of them are eating it at home at least once a week, but a much lower percentage of them are saying they're eating it out at restaurants and fast food establishments. Of course, this is not surprising. Most people aren't eating out every day, especially, given cost of living pressures now. When we break this down by market and by generation, we do see some slight differences, so not huge. We see that European consumers are a bit more likely than North Americans to be eating seafood at home. French and Spanish consumers, when you look at the last set of charts, are much less likely to eat at fast food restaurants. So that's over 50% or over of them who say they never do it. So this really reflects cultural preferences in those markets. And then if you look at younger generations, you can see they're a little bit more likely to be eating out at restaurants and fast food places as well. In terms of where people are buying their fish and seafood, we can see that grocery stores really dominate as the top purchase point. So 80% of people are buying it at the grocery store. This is followed by the local fishmonger, seafood market, or specialty store, then restaurants. Europeans tend to lean a bit more into the specialty stores and fish markets, while North Americans tend to favor club stores like Costco, which don't really exist in France or Spain, for example. Something interesting when we looked at the generational data that's not shown on this slide was that I saw that younger generations are more likely to say that they prefer to shop at fish markets and specialty shops. I thought this was quite interesting, and this might just reflect how maybe younger people prefer a more curated experience when they're shopping, or they're more influenced by different types of food culture trends. Older groups might not be making the effort to go to these types of shops. Really, the grocery store is their main point of purchase. In terms of what people say they're buying, so this is self-reported frequency of what they're buying. Most people tend to prefer frozen, pre-packaged, or canned seafood. Those tend to be the most purchased formats. In Spain and France, consumers are more likely to buy fresh seafood than in other markets. Again, this reflects where they're shopping. So they're at the fish market or the specialty store. And also that they probably have a higher comfort level working with fresh seafood. So I think this is something just important to keep in mind, when you're thinking about communications and recipes for different markets, that there are different types of formats that they might prefer or be more comfortable with. So, maybe education might be needed on some product types. So now that we kind of know what they're buying and what they're doing, let's understand what they're considering and what matters when choosing seafood. So when we look at different purchase drivers, we asked consumers to rate how important each of these different attributes are to them when they are shopping for seafood. So we used a scale of 1 to 7, with 7 being extremely important when buying seafood. And on this chart, we're showing the top 2 boxes. So that means consumers gave this a rating of 6 or 7, so that's really high. And here you can see the rank order of importance for these different attributes relating to seafood. So safety, taste, and health lead the list, with 80% of them rating this very highly. This is followed by price at 68%. So all of these are very strong conventional drivers when it comes to food, and it's very consistent across all types of food studies that we do. But what's interesting is, not far behind price, we do see a number of responsible and sustainability related attributes showing up. So things like non-GMO, the treatment of animals, environmentally responsible production practices. These are all pretty strong at about 60%, rating these as very important. And we also see a majority saying things like traceability and responsible antibiotics use and fair working conditions for people in the supply chain also being highly important. When we look lower on the list, we see that brand and origin are a bit lower. So this tells us that sustainability, maybe in a broad sense, isn't so niche. It's actually, an expectation of consumers when it comes to purchasing seafood. And being certified as a responsible product could actually help consumers identify seafood that might align with some of these values or some of these things that they care about when shopping. But there is a challenge. Even though consumers care a lot about these issues, or say they care about these issues, they might actually not feel that confident in their ability to choose responsible seafood products. So they want to do the right thing, but they need help navigating, pretty complex seafood choices sometimes. So next, I'll just share some of those attitudes and concerns that show up with consumers. So we asked consumers to rate how well a number of these statements align with their own personal opinions as well as their own behaviors. And what we see is actually a bit of a mix of aspiration and uncertainty. So when we look at the first set of statements, so the top block, as I mentioned at the top of the presentation, seafood is believed to be one of the healthiest proteins by a majority of consumers, but they do have some concerns about its safety. 59% say they are worried about pollutants and microplastics and toxins in seafood, so there's a health and safety concern that shows up. And 56% of them are also worried about antibiotics use in farmed seafood. But consumers do want to make informed choices because, again, we have a majority of them saying, well, we want to avoid farm fish products that are from irresponsible companies. And 50% of them say they also want to make choices that help fight climate change, which I think is an interesting insight. And it's also an opportunity for the farm seafood sector to really highlight, how their products can help play a role in climate-friendly diets, because obviously fish can be raised with less energy than other land-based proteins like cattle. So these are pretty strong sentiments among consumers who are shopping for seafood. In the second block of statements, we do see some of the uncertainty showing up. We see nearly 40% admit that they don't really feel like they know enough to choose sustainable seafood options. And then we have quite mixed and divided responses with the next three statements, where it's about a third each, where people aren't sure if farm fishing is truly sustainable, if farmed fish helps to reduce biodiversity loss in the oceans, or that we need to consume less to protect the oceans. So what this tells us is something pretty important. Consumers do care deeply about health, safety, and sustainability aspects of seafood, but maybe they lack confidence and clarity. Um, and so it does highlight an opportunity for us to better educate and communicate to consumers on the benefits of farmed fish, as well as different types of responsible practices that are associated with seafood. So let's take a little bit of a closer look at how consumers are thinking about farmed versus wild-caught seafood and what might drive these preferences. So when we asked people what best reflects the origin of the type of seafood that they're buying or eating, we see that nearly two-thirds of consumers say they either buy both or they don't really know the origin. So this just reinforces that origin is not really necessarily a strong purchase driver, or it's not really that important among a majority of consumers. We can see that this is fairly consistent across the markets. We do see a little bit of a slight preference for wild caught over farmed fish, but this gap isn't all that wide, and it could be potentially closing. You can see that older consumers or older generations tend to favor wild caught a little bit more than younger consumers, and younger consumers are more likely to favor farmed fish, particularly Gen Z. When we asked people why might they prefer one type over the other, farm fish tends to win on affordability and availability and accessibility, while wild fish is seen to be a bit more natural, better tasting and higher quality, and also free of antibiotics. So all of these are kind of very tangible benefits that consumers are listing here. We do see a little bit of a generational difference. Gen Zs tend to value affordability and health a bit more, while boomers are more lean a little bit more toward natural and low antibiotics use. Interestingly, if we look at the bottom of the list, we see that there isn't necessarily a very strong belief that farmed or wild-caught fish is particularly better for the environment, nor do we really see that the preference of origin is kind of strongly values-based. So again, this suggests that, the reason they're choosing their seafood products is really just quite for practical reasons. When we ask consumers, well, okay, well, what does matter to you in farmed seafood production? And we see here that they actually prioritize safety by far, followed by non-GMOs and use of proper sanitation. Then we also see quite a good number of people saying, well, I care about humane treatment of animals. I want to see certification of the whole production process and habitat protection. Are all pretty high, and you can see that it's slightly ahead or practically on par with taste. So emphasizing good practices relating to farm seafood probably can help assuage any lingering concerns consumers might have about farmed seafood products, if there are any. Interestingly, UK consumers tend to rate animal welfare and habitat protection higher than other markets. And I think this might be because in the UK, there's sort of strong cultural and regulatory norms around animal welfare. And there's a lot of, public discourse and advocacy around ocean health. So this might make these factors a little bit more salient for UK consumers. So really tailoring and thinking about your sustainability communications and how they align with local values is important for increasing the relevance of those communications and building trust with those types of consumers. This is also where certifications can come in as well, because they do provide a signal to consumers that a product meets the standards that they care about, and they often are seen as indicators of quality and trust. So let's dig a little bit more into certifications and how consumers think of these. So we'll first, 42% of consumers that we surveyed say say that buying certified products reflects their values, and 40% of them say they're willing to pay more for responsibly farmed fish. So this indicates that there is a pretty large segment of consumers that have a strong interest in responsible or eco-labeled seafood products, and that certification does signal values to them, and again, it can help build consumer confidence. When we ask consumers about their buying behavior relating to eco-labeled seafood, we see that quite a few of them, about 4 in 10, say that they intentionally buy eco-labeled products, either often or occasionally. We see about 20% of them saying, well, they're not knowingly buying certified products, and a little over a third of them saying they haven't heard of eco-labeling before. And I don't think this is necessarily a surprising result. Most consumers probably aren't necessarily thinking about eco-labels for every single type of product that they're buying. So in terms of the regional differences, we do see there's some slight differences in North America and the UK. They're the least likely to have heard of eco-labels, so that's somewhere in the 40% range. While awareness is actually really high in France for eco-labels, and then Spain is also relatively higher than the other markets. From a generational perspective, older consumers are a little less aware of eco-labels compared to younger consumers. So again, this might suggest that younger people might have a higher level of eco-consciousness when they're shopping. So here I just want to highlight the Best Aquaculture Practices logo as an example of how it could influence trust in purchase. So when we showed consumers in the survey the logo, we asked them to rate how much they trust BAP if they were to, when they see this logo. And what we see is nearly 2/3 of consumers say that they trust it, with Spain rating it particularly high in trust at nearly 3/4. So seeing this logo means kind of helps to build a little bit of trust in the logo when consumers see it. When we ask them if they saw a product carrying the logo, if it would influence their purchase decision, we see that about 55% said that it could have some influence on their purchase. So again, this shows that consumers don't necessarily need to be highly familiar with eco labels or certifications for them to be effective. They just need to really signal. They just act as a signal to consumers that they represent things or values that they might care about. So when we dig a little bit deeper into the analysis, so we did some advanced analysis, and I didn't show any of the data on this slide here, but our analysis did find that trust in certification labels like the BAP is built around 4 pillars. So being healthy and safe to eat is really the most important foundation. But environmentally responsible production, including protection of oceans, rivers, and lakes, is important to consumers. This ethical idea or ethical treatment of animals as well as people also comes up. So very strong social factors. And then also certifications having robust, independent, and comprehensive certification processes are important, as well as being able to trace products back to the farm. Sustainability-minded consumers will already have a predisposition for eco-labels like BAP, especially when it comes to socially and environmentally responsible practices. But another key pathway of building trust is really around educating consumers and addressing any of the health and safety concerns they might have about seafood or farmed seafood. So now that we know what builds trust, let's look a little bit at how we can reach consumers through the voices and the channels that they trust. So when we ask them who do they trust for information about responsible seafood and fish, we see that 3/4 of people say they trust fishers, fish farmers, and fishmongers. They also trust certification organizations as well as the scientific community. We see about 7 in 10 people saying chefs. So these are all very important influencers that can shape responsible seafood attitudes. And they are important sources that communicate that consumers trust for communications. Interestingly, if you look at the bottom, they say they are least likely to trust media and bloggers and social media influencers, even though I'm willing to bet that this is probably what consumers are being exposed to the most. So this is a little bit of a paradox. But I would say the reason they rate, fish farmers and certification bodies and scientists higher is because they're seen as more authentic and knowledgeable and credible in the space, right? Whereas social media is often filled with misinformation, and influencers aren't necessarily technical experts. But the implication here is that we really do need a dual approach, obviously using media and social media to reach and engage with consumers, but anchoring our messaging through trusted voices is really important for the credibility of those messages. So we asked consumers how they tend to learn about responsible seafood. So here they say they mostly hear about responsible seafood through packaging, then traditional media like TV and radio, and in-store signage and staff. But we see nearly 1/4 of people haven't really heard from any of these sources of information. So this just means that maybe consumers aren't necessarily seeing as much messaging related to responsible seafood out there, or they aren't necessarily seeking it out. In terms of the channels that they prefer to be engaged through, when we asked consumers, how do you want to be reached? They say they prefer the same channels, so packaging, in-store signage, and staff, and TV and radio. So again, these are really highly important ways to boost visibility of messaging and comms. And interestingly, social media, maybe not interesting, but obviously, social media is important for younger generations. So this just highlights a need to really use multiple channels to engage with consumers, but also, leveraging trusted voices is important. So this is what I have in terms of the research insights that came out of the Global Seafood Alliance study. I also want to take this opportunity to share or to zoom out a little bit and look at consumers' um, bigger lifestyle aspirations around health and sustainability, because communication is really just one part of the story. So for the last few slides, I just want to share some of the trends with you from GlobeScan's flagship program, research program, called the Healthy and Sustainable Living Study. So just to give you a little bit of background on this research, this is an annual study that we do around the globe with different design partners like Target, PepsiCo, Mondelez, as well as WWF, among many other research partners. So this program is really designed to help us understand how health and sustainability aspirations are really shaping consumer choices globally, and what that means for different sectors, including food and seafood. So in terms of the methodology, we do this study in 33 different markets. So we survey roughly 32,000 consumers around the world, with mostly 1,000 consumers per market. And you can see the regions we cover in the blue shaded countries. The data in our study is weighted to reflect general population census data. And we did this study this year in July and August, so right at the same time as we were doing the seafood study. So I just want to share some of these insights because I think they are relevant for our engagement with consumers, and important for you to understand, how they're thinking about health and sustainability. So when we ask consumers how much they want to change their lifestyles to be more healthy and or more sustainable, we found that 2/3 of them are saying they are interested in becoming both healthier and more sustainable. So we can see that these desires are very intertwined. We are also seeing that there's a huge majority of people saying that they are trying to improve their own health and well-being. And we also see nearly 80% of them agree that living an environmentally friendly lifestyle is actually good for both their physical as well as their mental health. So this really reinforces that sustainability isn't really just an environmental issue. It's actually part of, personal wellness or personal well-being. And that's a pretty powerful connection for, I think, seafood brands to leverage. Framing sustainability as a pathway to personal health and well-being can actually help, bridge some of the gaps between, concern and action on sustainability. As an example, I mentioned earlier that consumers say they, want to make food choices that help fight climate change. So farm seafood actually has a huge opportunity because it can help to deliver on both of these health and sustainability aspirations. We can also see that consumers are trying to shift their behaviors as well. Over half of consumers say that they frequently eat healthy food, and about 4 in 10 of them say they're trying to avoid processed food. So this means that people are looking for nutritious options. And again, this is where seafood can stand out because a large majority of consumers see this as one of the healthiest proteins out there. And from our other data, it's not shown on this slide. We know that when consumers are thinking about healthy food, they're really thinking about it being as nutritious, unprocessed, and organic. For sustainable food, they're thinking of it as, being good for the environment and ethically produced. So certified seafood, like those carrying the BAP logo, can really help to tick a number of these boxes because it could be seen as nutritious and also produced in a way with care for ecosystems as well as communities. So finally, I just want to share a slide showing what messages resonate most with consumers when it comes to food brands. So we asked them which messages kind of appeal to them the most, and we can see that, again, health and safety top the list here. So we see good for your health and no harmful ingredients. So this just shows a little bit of a messaging hierarchy, and this messaging hierarchy also aligns very well with the findings from the Global Seafood Alliance study that we just went through. So for seafood brands, this really means, it's important to lead with health and safety while also reinforcing sustainability values, which are all connected to, consumers' overall aspirations. So this is just a very, very brief glimpse of some of the insights that we have in our Healthy and Sustainable Living study. GlobeScan does do webinars on this sometimes, so do check our website for when that might be coming up. I think there might be one in January or February. And we also do briefings on this, so do get in touch if you're interested in learning a little bit more about the Healthy and Sustainable Living study. So just to wrap up the research and kind of to summarize it all, so looking at the big picture, consumers do aspire to be healthy and sustainable, and seafood is already seen as healthy, even though there are some concerns that we can address through some consumer education. Responsible practices as well as certifications really help to bridge any gaps and help to build trust and confidence in seafood. Transparency and clear communications are really needed to help reinforce the values that consumers care about. So again, health, safety, responsibility. And then there's really an opportunity to position farm seafood as a protein of choice for health conscious and sustainability-minded consumers. So really our job is to help provide consumers with guidance and reassurance and inspiration, and ultimately, find a way to connect health, sustainability, and trust in a simple and compelling way for consumers. So with that, I'm going to pause here and hand it over to Elise.
All right. Thank you so much, Gail, for walking us through those findings. There's so much we can take away from this research. And before we get into the Q&A, I just wanted to take a couple minutes to highlight some of the key takeaways from this data that are especially relevant to GSA's B2C marketing strategy going into 2026. It was great to see that 2/3 of consumers trust products carrying the BAP logo, and more than half said that they would be more likely to purchase a product carrying the label. This really speaks to the why behind our consumer marketing initiatives and why you should be talking to your customers about responsible sourcing and BAP. And as Gail said, it's really about reinforcing those values that consumers care about: health, safety, and responsibility. And On that topic, another data point I just wanted to call out is that the top way that consumers want to learn about responsible seafood is on packaging, followed by in-store signage. And I think this is an opportunity for producers, especially if you're BAP certified and you're not yet using the BAP label on packaging. This is a great way to communicate about your responsible practices to your customers, and it's at no additional cost to you to use it. And this, of course, is also relevant to retailers and food service companies and how they talk to their customers, whether it's via signage or other methods of communication. And this is something that we at GSA have tools for and can assist you with if you're interested. And our assets can also be customized based on what you're looking for. And then something that was really interesting to me was to see that chefs are among the most trusted sources of information about responsibly sourced seafood, and that, as Gail said, influencers were toward the bottom of that list. So as a marketer, that's just something that's really interesting to me, and it's something that we're definitely taking into consideration with our strategy going into next year. And then lastly, and this was not in Gail's slides, but another question that was asked was about which messages are the most motivating to consumers that indicate that the product is healthy, trustworthy, and responsible. And it was really great to see that a campaign message that we've been using for some time for BAP, Healthy Fish, Healthy Planet, Healthy You, was actually the top chosen tagline, followed by the tagline, Seafood You Can Trust. And it's a simple yet effective message, and Seafood You Can Trust is the main campaign message that we have chosen for our 2026 consumer campaign. And so going into next year, we'll be using this tagline for a year-long B2C campaign to continue to increase BAP brand awareness in our target markets. And this message also aligns really nicely with GSA's organizational tagline of building trust in seafood. And so we plan to introduce a new marketing toolkit in Q1 with point of sale materials, messaging, digital assets, et cetera. And if you're interested in getting involved in the campaign, you can either email me directly, my email's on the slide there, or you can look out for the email that you will receive with the webinar recording. There will be a link in that email to a landing page where you can fill out a form, and we'll give you more information about the campaign as it becomes available. So with that, I think we can open up the Q&A session. I think we do have some good questions in here. So let me just take a look. Okay, so Gail, we have a question here. It's very interesting that retailers and supermarkets are so low on the list of sources consumers trust about responsible seafood. Why do you think that might be? I would have guessed that would be much higher.
Yeah, I mean, I am looking at the chart again, and while it ranks pretty low, 60% of consumers still say they trust retailers and supermarkets. So it's, I would say maybe, and I'm not sure if this is, relevant in all markets, but I know, there's been a lot of discussion in the media about cost of living and also prices of some foods in the store, and there's been a lot of blame, I think, in the media or amongst consumers about retailers, and that may be why maybe it's just ranking a little bit lower than others, because they kind of see that the cost of food has been going up over the last few years for them. So that could be one reason why it doesn't rank as high. And then also, the ones that did score pretty high on this list are very, much focused on or related to the seafood sector specifically, right? So, there's a strong science component, the certification organizations, and then, of course, at the top was the fishers and the fishmongers. So maybe there's a little bit more of a, technical expertise that's related with those stakeholders versus others that showed up a bit lower on the list.
Okay, thank you. Let's see what else we have here. We have a question. Is non-GMO driven by European consumers?
Yeah, so I'm looking at the data now, and it actually really is similar across the board in terms of their ratings. I would say, maybe in France, it's a little bit higher, but it's pretty consistent across the markets. I would say where there is a bigger difference is with the older generations. So people in the boomer generation particularly rated this highly, but it actually declines among the younger generations.
Okay, let's go to this one. How do the factors for choosing differ between countries? Specifically, where is safe, fair working conditions most important?
Hmm. Yeah, again, I'm looking at this, and um, it's actually consistent across the markets, except for the UK, where this is quite high. And so, at a global level, about 20% of consumers chose that as one of their 5 options. So they chose fair and safe working conditions. But in the UK, this was a bit higher amongst those consumers. So over a quarter of them, like 27% of them. And again, I think this just might be due to the cultural context and broader awareness in that market around labor and labor rights and fair treatment of employees.
Okay, let's see. There's this one question. While Gen Z is more of an online consumer, when they want to eat seafood, they go to buy fresh or fresh frozen seafood from the available shops in their area. Is this the case?
I don't know if there's like a much higher preference amongst Gen Z. I don't have that data offhand in front of me, but I would say people are prioritizing the convenience factor. Um, what they say and self-report that they're buying, it could be different from what they're actually buying. So for Gen Z, I would say that, they might claim they want a more curated experience and that they're going to the specialty stores. But, how that reflects in actual, point of sale data could be quite different.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's do this one. I liked hearing about generational differences and preferences. What do you think the main takeaways from this data are when thinking about older generations versus younger?
Mhm. Yeah, I think one of the things that was surprising to me was that the this idea of wild caught versus farmed fish. I think maybe years ago I heard there was a lot of I heard a lot more about this in the media, but what was interesting is that with the younger generations, they're not really thinking about it as much, or they're a little bit more neutral as to what they're actually.
Oh, I think we lost Gail. Hold on one moment. Gail, we lost you for a second there.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know.
That's
Something
okay.
popped up.
We can hear you now.
Okay. So yeah, that's a box popped up saying new device.
I think you're good.
Okay, I'm good. Yeah. So from a generational perspective, the farmed fish aspect was interesting to me, and then also, it's not surprising that younger people are going out more often to eat seafood, or eat to, maybe they're not cooking as much at home either. So it's an interesting finding, maybe not necessarily a surprising
Yeah.
finding. Yeah. And I think another piece that's kind of interesting too, and it's not necessarily shown in the slides here, is just this eco consciousness level. While younger people may be more eco-conscious, in some of our global data and, in our HSL study that I shared a little bit with you about, we are seeing sort of a softening around concern for the environment overall. And we think that some of this might have to do with climate fatigue. So, a lot of consumers are feeling, like they're doing everything they can already to, be as responsible and as sustainable as they can. So they're getting a little fatigued by that. But there's also possibly a lot of politicization around the issue of sustainability as well, and a little bit of a green hushing. So consumers aren't necessarily hearing as much about sustainability in the media as they might have, a few years ago. So that's just another interesting thing around, consumer attitudes, especially how younger generational attitudes could be changing as well.
On the same topic of different generations, let's go with this one. Do you think younger generations will value seafood more once they become older?
I mean, this is my personal opinion, but yeah, I think so. I think it might just be lower because younger people might not have been exposed to as much food, until they become adults and they start going out and exploring on their own. So, I mean, that was kind of my immediate interpretation of that as well. When I saw that data, it's like, oh, maybe they'll enjoy it more as they get older.
Yeah. Oh, there's a question here about the campaign. So I'll take this one. Will you include decapod crustaceans within the campaign and approaches? Any species that is certified currently under BAP standards is part of the campaign. So, as I said, if you are looking to get involved, please reach out to me and look out for that email in your inbox with links for more information. So, short answer is yes. Okay, we have a bunch. Let me see here. Trying to filter through. How about this one? Do you think the type or species of seafood impacts consumer favorability of seafood? For example, tilapia is mainly farmed, and even if it's certified sustainable, I feel tilapia has a bad reputation.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't collect data at this level, so I don't have any empirical evidence around this. But
Mm-hmm.
I think if we were to dig a little bit deeper, there's probably, most definitely um, some preferences for origin based on the species type. Unfortunately, we don't have that in the study.
There's also a question here about if there is a summary. Is there an executive summary of the study, or will there be one?
Well, there is, and I guess the question I think is with maybe you, Elise, whether or not
Yeah.
what we'll be sharing from this. I think everyone's going to get the recording and
Yeah.
the
So
slides.
we have everyone will receive a recording of this presentation. There was some of the slides at the beginning that Gail went through did have kind of some highlights and at the end of her presentation as well. So those are good references. We'll also be putting out a release shortly about the main findings from this study, so you can look out for that as well. Okay, let's see. I'm not, unless you're seeing any other ones, Gail.
I'm also scrolling.
How about this one about were consumers aware that GSA was conducting the study?
They weren't explicitly told at the beginning, though there were questions that were specific to the Global Seafood Alliance. Sorry, not to the Global Seafood Alliance, but specific to the BAP logo.
Yep.
Yeah. So they were not aware that this was done by the Global Seafood Alliance, or wasn't mentioned.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, let's see. I'll take this one. Let me pop it up. Okay, so how do certification programs best reinforce these findings? So this is really about the campaign that we're going to be doing next year, like I said, and so many of the issues that Gail talked about and what consumers care about, there are so many important messages in there that we're going to be including as part of our B2C campaign. So I think that that's the biggest piece, and how we go about that is through some of the assets that I mentioned, like point of sale materials, social media, digital assets. So there's more information to come on that, but we will definitely be reinforcing those messages with our campaign next year. Okay, I'm not seeing other ones. And we're coming up on time. So I think I'm going to end the Q&A with that question. Thank you so much, Gail, for walking us through all of this research. This is really helpful. And like I mentioned earlier, all of you will receive a copy of this webinar via email shortly. And look out for that press release that will be released soon as well. So with that, I'm going to conclude the webinar, and thank you everyone for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you everyone.